Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we are here with a super exciting budget magic this week. This deck is awesome. So I'm talking about Green Black Elves for Standard. As you can see, it'll set you back 22 bucks online, 75 bucks in paper, and we have a ton of videos this week. I jumped into the two-man queues with this deck. I built it, jumped in the two-man queues, and for some reason, I played 6 matches, and every single match was against a different deck, which never happens. Usually I play like 4 matches in a row against Mono Red, and then a couple Abzan, and I have to play like 10 matches to get the videos done, just because I don't want to duplicate matchups. But I played 6 matches against 6 different decks, and all of them are either Tier 1 or Tier 2 decks, like decks that were on camera at the Pro Tour, on camera at the GP this weekend. So we have an awesome amount of videos, and the deck absolutely killed it. Like, I was super impressed with how this deck performed. As you can see, we are playing a ton of creatures, 32 creatures, and 30 of these creatures are elves. So what we have going on here is we have 8 1-drops. We have 4 Elvish Mystics, 1 green, you get a 1/1, can tap a green mana. And then we also get 4 copies of Gnarlroot Trapper, which in our deck, since we have 30 elves, is almost a second copy of Elvish Mystic. Sure, you gotta pay 1 life to add the green mana, but it has additional value in the late game because you can give your attacking elf Death Touch, which is almost like giving it unblockable. As you'll see in some of the games we play, if you just leave up a Gnarlroot Trapper, a lot of times you can just swing your 1/1s into things, and people won't block them because they don't want to trade a real creature for one of your horrible 1/1s. So I guess that's the benefit of playing Gnarlroot Trapper and a bunch of tiny underpowered creatures. So those are the 1-drops. Then we have a bunch of 2-drops. Dwinian's Elite. This guy's awesome in an elf deck. It's basically 3 power across 2 bodies for 2 mana. So 1 in a green, you get a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, if you control another elf, you get a 1/1 elf warrior token. We almost always have another elf because we have 30 elves. So it's just a very efficient threat for the cost. And 2 bodies is actually really relevant. Elvish Visionary, 1 in a green, you get a 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. So this is just a value card. It's an elf on the battlefield. The nice thing about this is, yes, it's a 1/1 for 2, but it doesn't cost us a card. So even though it's not efficiently costed as far as its mana cost to power ratio, it's very efficient in that it doesn't cost you a card out of your hand to play it. So that's our 1 and 2 drops. Moving up the chain, we have a few 3 drops. You have 1 copy of Reclamation Sage. We have 4 copies of Reclamation Sage in the 75. And from my perspective, Rec Sage is one of the main reasons to play this deck at the moment. Rec Sage is super, super good against most of the big decks at the Pro Tour and at GP San Diego this weekend. If you think about it, take the Blue-Red Mill deck that we played last week, for example. Having 4 Rec Sages lets you kill all 4 of their Sphinx's Tutelage in an uncounterable way because the deck only plays negates and Reclamation Sage is a creature. So you can kill all of their win conditions and then just win with your other creatures. Also kills Alhemret's Archive in that matchup. There's a lot of consolation decks going on with Sigil of the Empty Throne and Starfield of Nyx, either green, white, or Abzan colored. Reclamation Sage kills everything in that deck that matters. It's also super good against the Thopter deck, the blue, red, and soul artifact deck, where on turn 3 this comes down and it kills anything that they can put an Ensoul artifact on. So, and that's their big threat and way of winning the game. So the Ornithopter, the Springleaf Drum, and if they put it on a Darksteel Citadel, you get to take and kill the Ensoul artifact itself. So Reclamation Sage still solves the problem. So Reclamation Sage is just super good. I could almost see playing more in the main deck, but for right now we have 1 in the main and then another 3 copies in the board. The other 3 drop we have is Shaman of the Pack. This is another reason to play the elf deck. For 1, a black and a green, you get a 3/2, and that's fine. It's somewhat on curve, but not exciting. But when it enters the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to the number of elves you control. So when we're playing all these 1-drops and the Dwinian's Elite, which is making 2 elves, and cycling through Elvish Visionaries, that's coming in and draining for 5, 6, 10 damage. So 1 or 2 copies of this is often enough, combined with a little combat damage, to win the game. 4 drops, we have 4 copies of Sylvan Messenger. This is another one of the glue cards that holds the deck together. It's only a 2/2 for 4 mana. When it comes into play, you reveal the top 4 cards of your library. you put all the elves that way into your hand and all the other cards on the bottom of your library. So basically this comes into play, and on average will draw us 2 cards. We have 30 elves, we have 30 other cards, so on average we'll hit 2. It's not uncommon to hit 3, sometimes it hits 1, but we are almost always getting 2 cards out of this, which makes it a pretty good deal. Then the Lord here, Dwinian Gilt-Leaf Dan, probably the worst Elf Lord ever printed, but also the only Elf Lord in Standard. So, yeah, we kind of have to play it just because it is an Elf Lord, and it helps all of our little creatures get better. One thing that it has going for it is Reach is actually pretty powerful, and people, for some reason, don't realize it has Reach. It's not the kind of card that you just glance at and think Elf Lord, oh, it probably has Reach. And they don't realize this until they slam a Thopter token into it, or we chump a Stormbreath Dragon, and so on. So that part of it can be pretty tricky. And the life gain is not bad in some matchups. Against Mono Red, we can get this on the battlefield, attack, and even gaining like 3 or 5 life that counteracts 1 or 2 whole turns from the red deck. So it can be powerful. The last elf, 5-drop, 2 copies of Gilt-Leaf Winnower. Gilt-Leaf Winnower is the ultimate hit or miss card. Against a deck like Abzan Control, where you got Coursers and Siege Rhinos and Tassigers, this is straight up better than Flametongue Kavu. It's harder to block, and it kills things with 5 toughness. In other matchups, like for example, some Dragons decks that are finishing the game with Stormbreath and Thunderbreak Regent and Goblin Rabblemaster, all of their creatures have symmetrical power and toughness, so it doesn't kill anything, and it's just an overcosted 4/3. So we have 2 in the main deck, and I guess that's fine. We want them somewhere in the 75 because of our next card. Teimer Sabertooth. This card, the one non-elf card, or non-elf creature card we have in the main deck, this is the reason to play the elf deck. And this is my proudest addition to this deck. Really, there's not much to build with the elf deck. You play every good elf there is in Standard. You can mess with the numbers a little bit, like 2 or 3 Dwyans, 3 or 4 Sylvan Messengers, but basically the deck builds itself. You play every playable elf card and hope that it gets there. But Teimer Sabertooth changes the whole equation. Teimer Sabertooth does several things for the deck. For one thing, one of our weaknesses is sweepers, Anger of the Gods especially, also Crux of Fate and Hostilities. Teimer Sabertooth has this ability where you can pay 1 and a green, and you return another creature you control to your hand, and Teimer Sabertooth becomes indestructible. So if we have a Teimer Sabertooth on the battlefield, we can't completely counter an Anger of the Gods, but we can make the Teimer Sabertooth indestructible and bounce back 1, or if we have enough mana, 2 or 3 of our most important creatures and play them again the next turn. So that's one of the good things it does. The second good thing it does is it just flat out blanks target removal. Once we have a Teimer Sabertooth and can leave up 2 mana, Hero's Downfall, Ultimate Price, even Banishing Light for the most part, although it can hit Teimer Sabertooth, it just blanks these cards because we can pick up whatever creature is targeted, and if they target the Sabertooth, we pick up something else and make the Sabertooth indestructible. Finally, this is our combo card. In the Legacy Elf decks, they have Wirewood Symbiote, which is this 1-drop, where you can bounce an elf back to your hand. Well, Teimer Sabertooth is our overcosted but standard legal version of this. If you look through our list of cards, Reclamation Sage, enter the battlefield, destroys target artifact or enchantment. Gilt-Leaf Winnower, enters the battlefield, destroy target creature, non-elf creature whose power and toughness are not equal. Sylvan Messenger, enters the battlefield, look at the top 4, put some elves in your hand. Shaman of the Pack, enters the battlefield, target opponent loses lives to the elves you control. Elvish Visionary, enters the battlefield, draw a card. Dwinian's Elite, enters the battlefield. If you have an elf, you get a 1/1 token. Almost our entire deck has these enter the battlefield abilities, and Teimer Sabertooth allows us to reuse those again and again. It lets us combo kill with only 1 copy of Shaman of the Pack. Cast it, pick it up, cast it, pick it up. Drain our opponent for 15, 20 life. It allows us to grind out control decks with Sylvan Messenger and Elvish Visionary. And it allows us to beat decks like Abzan because we can just repeatedly pick up our Gilt-Leaf Winnower and kill all their Siege Rhinos and Coursers and Tassigers. Also, same thing with Rec Sage, like Green-White Constellations almost cannot beat Infinite Reclamation Sage. So this card is, it's so good. It is, for me, it is the reason to play the deck. Even though it's not an elf, this is the reason to play the elf deck. The rest of the main deck, 4 copies of Court of Calling. as you can predict, this is our way to put together whatever combo we need. So it's 3 green and X, and it has Convoke, so you can tap a creature to reduce its mana cost by 1, and you search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less, put it on the battlefield, shuffle your library. So this is how we get away with playing 1 Rexage main deck, 2 Teimer Sabertooth, 2 Gilt-Leaf Winnowers. We can search for these cards with Chord of Calling and make sure we always have access to them when we need them, but when we don't need them, our odds of having them sitting, rotting away in our hand aren't too high. And it's also worth noting, with some of our cards like Dwinian's Elite, Elvish Mystic, Gnarlroot Trapper, when we have a Chord in hand and our plan is to Chord, those cards are basically free. Because for every creature you control, basically adds a mana for Chord of Calling. So you play Dwinian's Elite, you get 2 creatures for 2 mana. You come out neutral when it comes to casting Chord. So this allows us to empty our hand and tap all of our mana to play a bunch of elves, and then we can still tap out and get one of our big important creatures here using the Convoke ability. So for those, I know it's the most expensive card in the deck at 35, almost 36 bucks for the playset, which is like half of the deck's cost, but it's really important to the deck. Finally, 3 copies of Ultimate Price. Sometimes we just need to kill a Pelucranos or a Stormbreath Dragon, and Ultimate Price does a good job of doing that. As for the lands, we have 9 forests, we have 4 swamps, 4 Llanowar Wastes, and 4 Jungle Hollow. The mana base has been pretty solid. The one change I would make, if you have Temple of Malady, I would reduce the Jungle Hollows by 2, so go down to 2 copies, cut a forest and a swamp, and play 4 copies of the Scryland. Otherwise, I don't think there's much more you can do with the mana base. And the sideboard, 4 copies of Duress. Comes in against control matchups where we're worried about counter spells. Also pretty good against the blue-red decks that are relying on Soul Artifact or Sphinx's Tutelage. Back to Nature might be excessive with our 4 copies of Reclamation Sage, but this is the ultimate trump to any Constellation-based matchups. Self-Inflicted Wound, another all-star. This is another way to deal with Abzan, the green-white Kibler deck that's popular. Not only does it make our opponent sacrifice a creature, but it also loses 2 life, so it helps along with our kill our opponent. We're kind of an aggro combo deck, so it helps with that plan with the life loss. We already talked about Rexage, one of the best and most important creatures in the deck, one of the reasons to play the deck. So good. Finally, Minister of Pain, the other non-elf creature in the 75. This one is basically there to deal with Hangerback Walkers and other things that make Thopter tokens. It's pretty good at that. It can come in, exploit like a token from Dwinian's Elite, or even a Elvish Mystic or Visionary in the late game, and wipe away a whole board full of Hangerback Walker tokens or Goblin Rabblemaster tokens. And it works good in conjunction with Rexage, because Reclamation Sage can kill the Hangerback Walker, and even if it has 6 counters on it, normally those 6 Thopter tokens would kill us, since we don't really have a lot of ways to deal with flyers. But Minister of Pain comes in and cleans those all up. So it's definitely a good card to have in the sideboard. Anyway, I was super impressed with this deck this week. It played super well, it was super fun, and I was just absolutely beating up on Tier 1 decks with it. I felt like we really had a good matchup against a lot of the most played and most important decks in Standard. So give it a shot. I don't think you'll be disappointed, and I hope you enjoy the videos.